The sleek metallic walls of the spaceship hummed softly as Lucas stood at the entrance to the princess's quarters. His boots clicked against the cold floor as he hesitated for a moment before stepping inside. He was a human guard assigned to protect the alien princess Lyra, but he never expected this assignment to feel like a punishment. The princess's room was dark, lit only by the soft glow of distant stars outside the windows. The ship was silent, save for the faint hum of its engines. It looked like something out of a science fiction story, a place where high-tech machinery met the elegance of royal luxury. There were plush cushions in every corner, a grand bed covered in silken sheets, and intricate holographic displays of alien landscapes decorating the walls. But despite its beauty, Lucas couldn't shake the sense that this room, this ship, was no sanctuary. Lyra lay on the bed, her back to him, staring out of the window into the vastness of space. Her platinum blonde hair, braided intricately, shone in the dim light, and her pointed ears peeked out from beneath her hair, a reminder that she was no ordinary human. Lucas had never met an alien like her before. He had been trained for years to protect Earth, not to get tangled up in intergalactic politics or to protect someone like her, an alien princess from a distant world. "Princess Lyra," he said, his voice firm but polite. "I've been assigned to guard you. I need to know what your orders are." Lyra didn't move at first. She didn't even acknowledge his presence. Lucas was used to the cold reception of royalty. He had been assigned to protect important figures in the past, but there was something different about her, something distant, almost unreachable. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she spoke, her voice soft but edged with authority. "You are my guard," she said, "but that does not mean I need your protection." Lucas blinked in surprise. It wasn't the words themselves that surprised him. It was the tone. There was something in her voice that conveyed more than just arrogance. It was a hint of fear, maybe even vulnerability. Yet she remained still, staring out into space as if the sight of distant stars could give her some comfort he couldn't provide. "I'm not here to impose," Lucas replied carefully, "but the orders are clear. I'm to stay here and ensure your safety, Princess. I've been informed that there are threats against you." At the mention of threats, Lyra's shoulders stiffened, her face hardening. She turned her head, just enough for Lucas to see the intensity in her eyes. The calm exterior she had been holding up cracked for a brief moment. He could see something behind her eyes, a struggle, a burden, that she wasn't ready to share. The unease in the room suddenly shifted, and Lucas felt a shiver run down his spine. "I know you think I'm just another alien princess," she said, her voice now colder. "But I am not. I don't need your protection. You can go back to your duties and forget about me." The words were sharp, like ice cutting through the tension in the room. It was as if she wanted to push him away, to keep him at arm's length. Lucas couldn't understand why. She was royalty, and he was just a soldier. A soldier with orders. It was a simple task, or at least it should have been. But there was more to this mission than just standing guard. Lucas sensed it, even if he couldn't yet put his finger on it. Lyra's resistance to his presence, the way her gaze shifted nervously whenever their eyes met. Something was off. She was hiding something, and he needed to figure out what. Before he could respond, the ship suddenly jolted, sending them both off balance. Lyra gasped, and for a brief moment Lucas saw genuine fear flash across her face. She quickly regained her composure, but it didn't escape his notice. The ship's systems came to life, lights flickering, and an alarm began to blare. Lockdown sequence initiated. The voice of the ship's AI announced. "Threat detected." Lyra's eyes widened. "No," she whispered. She turned to face Lucas, her face pale. "You need to stay with me." Lucas was ready to argue, to remind her that he was a guard and that his mission was to ensure her safety. But something in her voice made him pause. This wasn't about an alien invasion or a hostile enemy. It was something much more personal. Lyra wasn't just a princess. She was someone who had been thrust into a situation she couldn't control. Without another word, Lucas moved to her side. The ship's lights flickered again, casting long shadows across the walls. The air felt thick with tension, and Lucas felt the weight of the moment settle in. Lyra was now his responsibility, not just as a guard, but as someone who might hold the key to something much larger than he could have ever imagined. He moved to the control panel, scanning the screens for any signs of danger. But nothing made sense. There was no visible threat, no obvious attack. Instead, the screens flickered with images, strange symbols, alien codes, and encrypted messages he couldn't decipher. "What is this?" Lucas muttered, feeling the unease grow. Lyra was watching him now, her expression unreadable. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stepped closer, her eyes narrowing as she studied the screen. Lucas could see the wheels turning in her mind. Whatever was happening, she knew more than she was letting on. She finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "You don't know it yet, but we're both in grave danger." And with that simple statement, the room's atmosphere shifted. The tension that had been building all along exploded into something far more dangerous. The princess wasn't just a royal figure. She was at the center of something much bigger than either of them could have ever imagined. What was she hiding? And why had she been sent to Earth in the first place? These questions swirled in Lucas's mind, but one thing was clear. This mission was about to get a lot more complicated. The stakes had just risen, and there was no turning back now. Days passed since the initial encounter, but the tension in the room between Lucas and Lyra never quite settled. Though their faces remained polite, the air between them was thick with unanswered questions, hidden emotions, and unspoken words. They were forced to coexist in the same space, but neither of them had yet figured out how to bridge the distance that stretched between them. Lucas's duties as a guard were clear: protect the princess at all costs. But what was it that made her so difficult to guard? Lyra, the alien princess with her glowing blue eyes and braided platinum hair, was nothing like any royal or noblewoman Lucas had ever encountered. She was powerful, distant, and cold. Yet beneath her royal demeanor, he sensed a complexity that intrigued him. At first, their interactions were strained. Lyra would barely speak to him, her eyes drifting away whenever he addressed her. She spent most of her time in the corner of the room, her mind seemingly lost in distant thoughts. When she did speak, it was only to assert that she didn't need his protection. Lucas, ever the obedient soldier, respected her wishes, keeping a watchful distance, but his curiosity began to grow. What was she hiding? Why had she been brought to Earth? And why did it seem like there was something in her past that she was terrified to reveal? One evening, after a long day of silence, Lucas sat near the door, his eyes scanning the room. Lyra was at the window again, staring into the vast emptiness of space. There was something almost haunting about the way she looked, at the stars as if they held the answers to her troubles. The spaceship's hum was the only sound in the room, but even that seemed to grow louder with each passing minute. "You've been staring at that window for days now," Lucas said, breaking the silence. "What are you looking for out there?" Lyra's gaze shifted toward him, and for a brief moment he caught a glimpse of something in her eyes, a flicker of emotion, but it was gone as quickly as it came. She turned back to the window. "I'm looking for answers," she replied softly, her voice heavy with something Lucas couldn't place. "But I don't think I'll find them out there." The words lingered in the air, and Lucas felt a chill run down his spine. There was more to her than just a princess, more than the title that had been forced upon her. Lucas knew that deep down, Lyra was running from something, and it wasn't just the threats on her life. It was something much darker. But what? He didn't ask, not yet. There was still too much to uncover, too much to understand. He had to be careful. Pushing her too hard might drive her away completely. The next day, Lucas found himself sitting near Lyra again, watching her as she sat cross-legged on the floor, engrossed in some strange, glowing object. It looked like a holographic device, a tablet of some sort, but the symbols and patterns on it were alien. He couldn't understand them, and that made him even more curious. "What's that?" Lucas asked, his voice a bit softer this time, trying not to disturb her concentration. Lyra didn't look up but spoke anyway. "It's something from my world. A message from my people, from before I left." She paused, her fingers brushing over the holographic display. "They didn't want me to go. They wanted me to stay and fulfill my duties as their queen, but I couldn't. I couldn't stay and watch them destroy everything." The words were so unexpected that Lucas's breath caught in his throat. He had never seen Lyra so vulnerable, so human. For the first time, he saw her not as a princess but as someone who had made a difficult choice, a choice that came with consequences. "You're running from them," Lucas said quietly, almost more to himself than to her. Lyra's fingers stopped moving on the display and she looked up at him, her eyes meeting his for the first time in days. "I'm not running. I'm trying to survive." Her voice broke, just for a second, and in that moment, Lucas saw the fear that she had been hiding so carefully. "If I don't make it to Earth, if I don't escape, my people will use me as a weapon. They'll control me and they'll use my power to destroy everything I care about." Lucas didn't know how to respond. He had always known there was more to Lyra's story, but this was something he couldn't have imagined. She wasn't just a princess with a royal title. She was a fugitive, a person on the run from her own people, someone whose very existence was seen as a threat. The room between them, once full of tension and distrust, suddenly felt smaller, as if the walls were closing in. "You don't have to do this alone," Lucas said, his voice firm but gentle. "I'll protect you. I'll help you. You're not alone anymore." Lyra's eyes flickered with something, hope perhaps, but she quickly masked it, putting up the walls she had built so long ago. "You don't understand. You can't protect me. Not from what's coming. No one can." Lucas stood up and moved toward her. "Then tell me what's coming. Tell me what you're running from. You don't have to face it by yourself." For the first time, Lyra didn't pull away. She stared at him as if trying to decide whether or not to trust him. The weight of her decision seemed to hang in the air. Finally, after a long silence, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "They're coming for me," she said. "And they'll stop at nothing to get me back." The words hung in the air like a dark cloud. Lucas felt his heart race. Whoever was coming for her, whatever power she was running from, it was real. And it wasn't going to stop until it had her. But in that moment, something changed between them. Lyra, the princess who had kept him at arm's length, had allowed him to see a part of her that no one had ever seen before. And in turn, Lucas knew that he couldn't just walk away. He couldn't abandon her. Not now. Not when he knew what she was truly up against. The room that had once felt cold and alien was now filled with a shared understanding. Their connection, though unlikely, had begun to grow. Lucas wasn't just her guard anymore. He was her ally. And together they would have to face whatever was coming. The days that followed were filled with uneasy silence, broken only by the occasional soft hum of the spaceship's engines. Lucas kept his distance, respecting Lyra's need for space, but he couldn't ignore the growing sense of danger. Every time the ship shuddered, every time the alarms went off, his heart would race. There was something else. Lyra had spoken of danger, of threats from her own people, but she had been vague. Every conversation, every moment of trust, was always followed by hesitation, as if she was holding back something crucial. He needed to know more. They couldn't survive in this uncertain environment without understanding the full extent of the threat. And yet, every time he tried to press her for more information, Lyra would retreat into herself, closing off like a fortress. Her eyes, always distant, would darken with the weight of unspoken fears. But Lucas could feel the walls coming down between them, piece by piece. Something was shifting. The way she looked at him now was different. There was something unspoken in her gaze, something more than just mistrust. There was desperation, and he understood why. One evening, as the stars outside glittered against the vastness of space, Lucas decided he couldn't wait any longer. He had to know. He had to find out what exactly Lyra was running from. He had already promised to protect her, but to do so, he needed to understand the real threat. He found her sitting near the small window again, her fingers gently tracing the cool glass. The soft light from the stars cast a faint glow on her face, illuminating the intricate designs on her skin, ancient symbols, markings of her royal bloodline. Lucas stepped quietly into the room, making sure not to startle her. "Lyra," he said gently, "you've spoken of your people, of the danger you're in. But I need to know more. I need to understand why you're running." Lyra didn't turn to look at him. She remained still, as if she was thinking carefully, weighing her options. Her silence stretched on, making the air feel thick with tension. Just as Lucas was about to ask again, she spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "I didn't want this life," she began, her words heavy with emotion. "I didn't want to be born into a world that expects me to control their future, to be the weapon they always needed me to be." Lucas frowned, stepping closer. "What do you mean? What kind of weapon?" Lyra finally turned to face him, and for the first time, her eyes weren't just filled with royal detachment, they were full of something much deeper, much darker. "I am a weapon, Lucas," she said. "I was born to wield power. The kind of power that could destroy entire planets if I wanted to. My bloodline is built on ancient, forbidden magic that can manipulate the very fabric of life itself. But it's not a gift, Lucas. It's a curse." Lucas felt his chest tighten. The weight of her words hung in the room like a thick fog. He had known that Lyra was no ordinary princess, but he had never imagined this. She was more than just a royal figure caught up in political games. She was a living weapon. A weapon that could change the course of entire galaxies. "And your people?" Lucas asked softly. "They want this power?" Lyra nodded slowly, her gaze distant again. "They've always wanted control. They don't see me as a person. They see me as a tool, something to use. I've been trained my entire life to harness this power, to bend it to their will. But I can't. I won't." Lucas took a step closer, his voice full of understanding. "That's why you're running. You're running from them, from what they want you to become." Lyra's lips trembled slightly, her resolve cracking just enough for him to see the fear beneath. "I had no choice, Lucas. If I stayed, they would have used me to destroy everything I care about, my world, my people. They wanted me to lead a war that would have ended millions of lives. But I couldn't do it. I couldn't be the person they wanted me to be. So I ran. I came here to Earth to hide." Lucas's heart clenched in sympathy for her. She was not just a princess in exile. She was a person who had been forced into a role she could never escape. Her struggle wasn't just about survival. It was about her very identity. "You don't have to be that person," Lucas said, his voice firm with a conviction that surprised even him. "You're not their weapon. You don't have to do what they say." Lyra's eyes met his then, and for a brief moment Lucas saw something flicker. Hope. A glimmer of the person she longed to be. But it quickly vanished, replaced by the weight of her responsibilities. "They will come for me, Lucas. They won't stop. They'll tear apart this ship, this planet, if they have to." Her voice shook now, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "I'm not just running from them. I'm running from the only life I've ever known. I'm running from the legacy they want to force upon me." Lucas reached out, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "And you'll be running with me. We'll find a way to stop them." Lyra looked at him, her expression softening for the first time in days. "But how? How can we fight something like this?" Lucas didn't have an answer. He had no idea what they were up against, no clue how they would survive what was coming, but he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't let her face this alone. Not after everything she had told him, not after everything she had been through. The room, once filled with silence and tension, now felt warmer, as if a bond had begun to form between them. The truth had come out, and with it, a shared understanding. Lyra wasn't just an alien princess. She was a person caught in a nightmare of her own making, trying to escape the very thing she had been born into. And Lucas? He was no longer just her guard. He was her ally, her protector, and he would stand by her no matter the cost. But the threat was real, and Lucas could feel it in his bones. The people Lyra was running from weren't just going to let her go. They would stop at nothing to bring her back. And when they did, Lucas would have to be ready, because their survival depended on it. The days seemed to stretch on endlessly as Lucas and Lyra navigated the growing tension in the spaceship. Every passing moment felt heavier, the sense of impending danger lingering in the air like a thick fog. The quiet hum of the ship was a constant reminder that time was running out. Lyra had told Lucas everything about her power, her people, and the terrible fate she was trying to escape. But the path ahead was still unclear. They were running out of time. Lucas spent every waking moment trying to devise a plan, anything that could keep them both safe. But the more he learned about Lyra's past, the more he realized just how dangerous their situation was. She wasn't just running from a political faction. She was fleeing a destiny that had been forced upon her since birth, a destiny that would eventually catch up to her, no matter how far they ran. The ship, once a peaceful refuge, now felt like a prison. Lyra's power was the key to everything, but it was also the source of their greatest danger. She could feel it too. The ship's systems were malfunctioning more often now. The alarms had become a regular occurrence, and each time they sounded, both Lyra and Lucas could feel the walls closing in. On one particularly tense evening, the lights flickered again, plunging the room into darkness for a few moments before the emergency lights kicked in. Lyra's breath hitched and Lucas could feel the change in her body tensing, her mind working furiously to prepare for whatever was coming next. "They're here," Lyra said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. The weight of those 3 words seemed to crush the air out of the room. "They found me." Lucas could feel his pulse quicken. The threat wasn't just an abstract idea anymore, it was real. The people Lyra had been running from were closing in, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. But Lucas wasn't going to let her face this alone. Not after everything they had been through. "They won't get you," Lucas said firmly, his voice steady. "I'll protect you. I'll find a way to stop them." Lyra turned to face him, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and something else. Hope. It was a rare look for her, one that she had only shown in fleeting moments. It was a look that told Lucas everything he needed to know about how much she had come to rely on him. But deep down, both of them knew that this wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about taking a stand. Lyra had spent her entire life running, hiding, fearing the destiny that awaited her. But now, with Lucas by her side, she had a chance to fight back, to rewrite her story. And that was a gift she had never allowed herself to believe she could have. Lucas wasn't sure how long they had before the inevitable happened, but he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't going to let anyone take her from him. Not without a fight. As the minutes ticked by, the ship began to shudder violently. The alarms blared once more, and the walls seemed to tremble under the pressure of what was happening outside. Lucas grabbed Lyra's arm, pulling her close to him. "We need to get to the control room," he said urgently. "We have to stop them before they board." Lyra nodded, her expression hardening with determination. She had been running for so long that it was hard for her to believe she could fight back. But she wasn't the same person she had been when she first arrived on Earth. The fear had faded, replaced with something stronger, something more powerful than the magic that flowed through her veins. Together they moved quickly through the corridors of the ship, the sound of their footsteps echoing in the narrow hallways. As they neared the control room, the doors opened automatically and Lucas's hand instinctively went to the weapon at his side. But as they stepped inside, they were greeted not with the threat of invasion, but with a startling silence. The control room was dark, the holographic displays flickering erratically. It was as if the entire ship had been locked down. But there, standing before them, was something neither of them had expected. An alien figure, tall and imposing, with eyes that glowed like molten gold. "You should not have come here, Lyra," the figure said, its voice cold and calm, though tinged with something darker. "You cannot escape your destiny. It is too late." The figure's words sent a chill down Lucas's spine, but he stepped forward, his body tense and ready for whatever came next. "You won't have her," he said firmly, his voice unwavering. "Not without a fight." The alien figure looked down at him with disdain. "You think you can protect her?" it sneered. "She is a weapon that will bring destruction to your world." Lyra's eyes narrowed, and for the first time since Lucas had met her, he saw the full extent of her power. The air around her began to crackle with energy, her body glowing with an ethereal light as her power surged through her. Lucas could feel it too, the energy radiating from her like a force of nature, unstoppable and overwhelming. "You don't control me anymore," Lyra said, her voice steady but filled with fierce determination. "I control my own destiny." With a sudden, powerful movement, Lyra unleashed a burst of energy, sending the alien figure flying back into the wall. It crumpled to the floor, defeated. The room fell silent once more, the only sound the heavy breathing of Lucas and Lyra as they stood together victorious. But as the dust settled, Lyra collapsed into Lucas's arms, exhausted but relieved. She had done it. She had taken control of her life, and she had fought back against the people who had sought to use her. She had faced her fears, and together, they had won. "I couldn't have done this without you," Lyra whispered, her voice barely audible. "Thank you." Lucas held her close, his heart full of emotions he couldn't quite express. "You're stronger than you know," he said softly. "You don't need anyone to save you." Lyra smiled faintly, her eyes fluttering shut as she rested in his arms. For the first time in a long time, she felt at peace. She had faced her greatest challenge, and with Lucas by her side, she had won. The past was behind her, and the future was now hers to shape. As they stood there in the quiet aftermath of their battle, Lucas knew that this was only the beginning. Whatever the future held, they would face it together. Because in the end, they had discovered something more powerful than any weapon: trust and the bond they shared. And that was the most powerful force of all.